Good afternoon and welcome to the Monee Heritage Society Heritage Center. It is January of 2023 and we're looking forward to the penultimate year before the Monee 150th anniversary in 2024. So we're kicking off a year of preparation for that celebration by doing a brief history of Monee in words and in pictures. I'm Christi Holston, President of the Heritage Society. This is Rachel White. She is the archivist for the Historical Society and also our technogenist. So she'll be in charge of the texts and I'll be in charge of the speaking. So welcome. I'm just outlining a brief history of the village of Monee. Monee, like so many small villages across America, was settled by immigrants in search of economic opportunity and religious freedom. Some came to avoid conscription in the armies that were battling across Europe. In the case of Monee, the settlers were predominantly German Protestants from the northern provinces of Hanover, Schleswig-Holstein, and Ostfriesland. The origin: Marie met and married an up-and-coming fur trader named Joseph Bailey in 1810. Joseph made a fortune trading with local inhabitants' furs, mainly throughout the Great Lakes, and was a savvy businessman. Due to his service in the Black Hawk War of 1832, Bailey obtained a land grant of 180 acres in Cary Township, later Monee Township, as part of the Treaty of Tippecanoe. It's believed that the property, which was located in what is now Raccoon Grove, was chosen because Bailey could see the future commercial potential of the area just south of Lake Michigan. Princess Monee almost undoubtedly never visited the reservation that was set aside for her and her 5 daughters, or the village named in her honor. Everybody says she was Potawatomi, and she wasn't that either. However, the Raccoon Grove area was home to many Native American tribes for thousands of years, particularly in later years the Potawatomi. The reservation land that was left to Monee was sold in 1835 to William Butler Ogden, a friend of Bailey's and the first mayor of Chicago, for about $5 an acre. Ogden immediately subdivided the property and had a plat made in 1851. Very early settlers in the Monee area, beginning in the 1820s and 1830s, were from New York and New England and along the East Coast. But they were by and large replaced in the 1850s by German immigrants who became the predominant cultural and religious force from that time forward. With the completion of the Illinois Central Railroad in 1853, the population began to increase rapidly. Just 2 years after Ogden platted and sold the land of Raccoon Grove, the Illinois Central Railroad built a train depot in Monee. They had been awarded large tracts of land along the railroad right-of-way and began selling them to the German immigrants. I don't know if I have it in this, but the reason I had never really understood why the German immigrants could come here and get such good land so quickly, but they were mostly from northern Germany, up in the lowlands where along Holland, where the land is very wet and marshy and low. And because of the Great Kankakee Swamp that came pretty close to this area, this land didn't get snapped up immediately because you had to tile under the fields to drain some of that water. So when I first saw all the little canals, particularly you can see them along I-65 in the fields, I was thinking, well, that was to irrigate the crops. Well, no, it was the exact opposite. That was to drain the field so it would be dry enough for them. And because the Germans were coming from the area, they knew how to do that. So they took the land that nobody else really wanted at that time. About this time, in 1849, Augustus Herbert, a veteran of the Mexican-American War, was awarded a land grant by the government of 160 acres in recognition of his military service. And in 1850, he built his home, which became one of the first homes in Monee, and he built it right where St. Paul's Church is right now. He sold some of the property to the railroad and had another portion laid out in blocks with streets and alleys. He sold most of the rest of the property to other settlers, and the town of Monee was laid out and worn. We just got a donation, you can see it behind us, of one of the original plat maps of the village of Monee. It's dated 1855, and that's a hand-done picture that we didn't even know still existed, and it just came in as a donation a couple of weeks ago. During the first 20 years of existence, Monee Station, as it was first known, became a boomtown and the most populous community in eastern Will County. Farming, mainly oats, corn, and hay, as well as dairy products, were the predominant occupations of the area. And the creamery where we're sitting was built because of that. A lot of dairy farmers here, and this is where they would bring their milk. And it was made in this building, mostly into cheese. The railroad made it possible to transport raw goods to Chicago, and Monee began to grow in response to the needs of the farmers. Grain elevators sprang up, as well as blacksmiths, grist mills, hotels, livery stables, and even a factory for the production of layman's combined agricultural machine, which we're not sure what it was. There was also a school and even a Baptist college here. By 1874, Monee had grown to a size where it made sense to incorporate as a village. A village board of trustees was elected, as well as a police magistrate. The municipal building was erected by 1879, and a water system and pump house built. In the mid-1890s, many new dwellings were erected from lumber salvaged from hotels built for the Columbian Exposition. They could bring them out here on the railroad. The first telephone communication was in 1894. It connected John Freese's home to his father Ado's store. A full system was installed in the village in 1899. By 1902, there were 21 telephones registered in Monee. By 1902, Monee was a thriving village. Cement sidewalks replaced wooden ones, and all barbed wire fencing along them was removed. Monee boasted both the cheese factory and the creamery. There was a doctor, 4 general merchandise stores, a meat market, a veterinarian, and a hotel. By 1914, the telephone company listed 123 telephone owners in Monee, and electric street lamps were installed. The Illinois Central tracks through Monee were responsible for the town's early growth, but might be said to be equally responsible for its stagnation and lack of growth from the 1920s onwards. Because of Monee's elevation, the highest between Chicago and Carbondale on the icy line, the need to take on water for the steam engines to be able to climb the hill created a bottleneck in the whole icy system. The current Monee Reservoir Forest Preserve was originally excavated in 1895 as a source of water for the steam locomotives for the Illinois Central trains. In the early years, it was also a source of Monee's annual ice harvest, and was later stocked with fish and used by Isaac Walton, and it's been a popular fishing and picnicking destination since. In October of 1921, there were 1,100 freight trains running over the icy tracks between Madison and Kankakee on a daily basis. There were also 32 passenger trains daily. In 1922, the Illinois Central Railroad officials presented a plan to depress the tracks, move businesses, build bridges, and replace the depot. And they gave Monee very little choice in the decision. These plans were approved by the village administration, kind of under duress, and the depot was moved back down to the track level. Without the grade crossing, however, freight trains were no longer required to slow down as they traveled through town. As automobile use increased, the demand for passenger trains decreased, and eventually they ceased stopping at Monee at all. This was the first blow to the growth of Monee. The second economic blow was dealt at the same time as the cut was being done. At that time, Monee was home to 4 banks, all of which folded in the Great Depression, causing severe hardship in the area. Churches were the foundation of village life. Of the many churches that were established in early years, St. Paul's United Church of Christ has endured and remains in active force within the village, as well as St. Boniface. The German Evangelical Church was built in 1860 on a plot of ground given by August Herman, and the congregation continued to grow, and by 1914 they decided to erect the large edifice that is there today. It was dedicated in 1915 in one of the largest gatherings ever brought to Monee, and there were 5,000 people who had chicken dinner on the lawn that day. The old church building was first moved across the street to the cemetery grounds and then to the Monee Fairgrounds further east on Marvin. It was finally demolished in the 1960s, and the church the church services were in German all the way through the 20s. The German Catholic Society was organized in 1866. St. Boniface Church was built in 1868 and is still used today. The first public elementary school in Monee was built in 1854 at Main and Eastgate. A new two-story structure was built in 1905 and was used for grades 1 through 10. Then it was demolished in the 1970s. And you'll see pictures of that, and the demolition of that school is part of the impetus that made it possible for us to save this building, because the outrage and hue and cry over our one remaining historic structure that just went down without any public opinion being asked for or given made it so that when we knew this building was going down, we moved quickly because we didn't want to lose the last remaining structure we had. Monee continues to struggle with the challenge of creating a community where people not only sleep but also work, shop, go to school, and have recreational opportunities. When Monee failed to grow, it caused a lot of things, and we did become more or less a bedroom community, where we live here. Now kids go to school in Crete, we go to the library in Piatone, we go somewhere to get groceries, and so Monee kind of has lacked that cohesive central core, which the Heritage Center and the village are trying to bring back. In the 1980s, there was a tremendous growth spurt with many new housing developments being built, a new elementary school erected, and a few new businesses springing up along Monee Manhattan Road, but most supported the traffic on I-57 and not really the village. Since the 1980s, Monee's growth has been installed and major infrastructure improvements needed to attract new residents in the current population. Surrounding towns have grown, but Monee has remained stagnant, more of the bedroom community. But with the arrival of the new Amazon distribution, it's not all good and it's not all bad, but we're taking advantage of the good that it does bring. 3,000 new jobs, as well as the new progressive village administrations. It's hoped that Monee can attract a broad base of new home construction, restaurants, retail, and supporting industries that will allow Monee to grow into the 21st century while maintaining its and reinstilling the small town atmosphere and community pride that were the hallmarks of our early years. Much of the information's roots are deep, and visit our Big Book page, and that's that. So, that's Monee's history in a nutshell. Are there any questions right off the bat that I could answer for you? Yes, sir.
Rachel had a shot a couple of moments ago of race cars.
We will go back. If there's no questions, we can go back and just start going through the pictures. Can you bring it back to me?
I didn't even get all of it.
Yes, and that was at the Monee Fairgrounds.
Really?
Monee,
Because I know that's an ancient picture, probably in the 20s or 30s, by the looks of those cars.
yeah, there was a Monee Fair Association was founded at the early part of the 20th century, and their fairgrounds were out where you see the subdivision.
Yeah.
It's called the fairgrounds. That was the fairgrounds, and there were, you know, all the normal things, and there was a racetrack there. And started out as a horse racetrack,
Right. So a lot of
and
them
then
were.
it went to Model T Fords who raced there. And I can remember my grandfather was an auto mechanic. He worked at Huntingdary in Blue Island, but for fun, he raced Model T cars out at the fairgrounds.
And you can see this building right there. That is St. Paul's Church. After they built the new one, someone bought it and moved it to the fairgrounds. Seats. Very noticeably a church.
There was a big dance hall out. Raccoon Grove was quite the hopping place. When it, before people started living out there on a permanent basis, folks lived in town and they would have, what did they call them, camps or?
The name would be like Freeze's Woods.
Yeah,
Paul's Woods.
and it was basically they would just go out to the woods and stake out a chunk of ground to camp picnic there.
Groves, right?
Yeah.
We have.
Creed had them.
Yeah, and so our ancestors, the name was Freeze, and we have pictures where it says Freeze's Woods, and they would just go out there and set up a table and have picnics, and then, you know, get firewood and things from.
And well into her 90s,
Well into her 90s, Grandma would want to go out into the woods and have a picnic on her birthday, and her birthday was May 2nd, and it was always so very
Bitter cold out
cold.
there. So that's
And
a
she's
free
the
family
second, or
gathering.
she's that first lady and the one that looks like
That's
Nancy.
On the right hand side.
The one that looks like Nancy right there.
Grandma, this is great Grandma Free. She was an interesting. She lived in a house just across on Chestnut Street, and every night to go to bed, you know, it was medicinal. You'd have a little nip of the whiskey. She was such a character. There was a story that I think it was the neighbor. Her daughter lived somewhere else. I'm not sure where, but her neighbor had a really nice set of lawn furniture. She never used it. I mean, she just never used it. So one day, it wound up at her daughter's house. Like, well, they never used it. I mean, she swiped her furniture off of their lawn, and just because she wanted to put it to good use. So, sorry, I think the statute of limitations on Grandma.
I kinda think mine out.
And that's a picture of one of the early fairs. Can you see? Right.
Right, you had a picture of an aerial view of a farm. Do you know this farm?
Pauline's.
Oh, that's right.
There, that was the location.
Well, I was recognizing.
It was their second farm, not yours. I don't think.
Well,
We'll take a look.
Well, because we have pictures of the barn.
Well, would that be Route 50 at the top of the photo?
This is,
No.
no, this is,
This is,
center.
they own the property that
No,
you now,
Kirsten.
live in.
They weren't Kirsten.
No,
Just a
that's
section. Little center. They owned that farm. Then during the Depression, they lost that property, is my understanding. John Thompson bought up all the property, all the farms that defaulted. Then they rented a farm after that. This is the farm that they rented
that
after.
barn is still there, at least it was a few years ago, right?
So that's Will Center Road, and it's somewhere between, if you know where, it's near where Judy Ogala lives, and it's on, this is the east side of the property. So the road is still there up until recently. This barn was still there, and right here is big metal corrugated barn that the state put up because it's now part of the property that the state has bought. So I was in that before it was completely demolished, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago. But everything else is gone.
Well, I thought Willard lived on our property until Davis's.
Well, that would make sense.
What year would that have been?
That would make sense if he did, because if he was there in the early 20s, when he was little, and then they lost the farm in the 30s, that would make sense. They moved out to here, and then they were there until the early 60s, and then they moved into town. So it all kind of fits together.
Okay.
Yeah, they gave up farming completely around 1950, 1959.
1959, something like that.
But that's the farm that they retired from. And that's not where you live.
Okay.
It's
That's
the
what I
next one.
wanted to see,
Yeah.
is it was that actually our
Yeah,
property?
no, I don't really have any, if we have any pictures of that, they're just a little bit of it with something I haven't really identified yet. We'll keep looking. This is a threshing gang from town.
This
That was the
plowing.
of the airplane. There's you see everywhere is a picture of an airplane that landed here in front of the early, and everybody in town went running out to have their picture taken with the airplane. Do you want to just start at the beginning and we'll go through the slides? What other
I
questions?
think what you had was, I think you did a different talk than this was set up for, because we started out with, Illinois was a prairie, this is what it would have looked like, kind of thing. Then we went into why Augustus Herbert
Okay.
was a Spanish-American War, Mexican War veteran. That's why he was granted the land and all
Right.
that stuff, but this lines for. And then a nice obligatory immigration picture that's really small.
These are stock, these are people,
Yeah.
stuck with.
And a ship of one of Tom's people, and where they came from, and then this is the Bailey Homestead in Chesterton. Yeah, that's, you guys know more about that.
And
Out there.
Yeah.
that's currently part of the national park.
Right.
So
Yeah.
James Joseph Baylor was a big cheese. I mean, as far as, he had a trading post on, one of the reasons we think he picked property here when he was allowed was because he lived in Porter County, Indiana. This is their homestead there. but he also had a trading post on the Kankakee River, just about where the park is now, where they've got that overlook.
I didn't realize that.
Just right about there, he had a trading post. And so he would have traversed diagonally.
On the river.
Yeah, and he would have come through because Rock Creek that flows into the Kankakee, just at the park there, originates in Raccoon Grove. So he would have been able to follow the Rock Creek all the way straight down.
I'm gonna pass this book around, since we're talking about Bailey's. So this was written by Princess Monee's granddaughter, and I got it on Amazon. So anyway, and I haven't read it yet, but I'll just pass it around in case anybody wants to get one. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, that one just won't make it all the way right.
Something like this, if someone has a copy of this picture in their archives and has identified that he,
That is so cool.
yeah, I mean,
You know who might be able to, you might want to talk to Bob about that.
Are most of these from your family collection, these photographs?
Mostly.
Wow, they're great.
Yeah.
Too.
I mean, and that's why I think I've been so interested in this, because I grew up with you.
Yeah.
You know, and you're looking at it, and my dad would tell me who everybody was, and of course, I'm a kid, and,
So did somebody in your family?
Don't know or
actually
don't care.
Take photographs?
yeah, for the most part.
Wow. Those are
It's
great.
an 062 or 064.
We had a great aunt, Louise, as well, and Aunt Louise had some phenomenal, I don't know if there's any of Aunt Louise's photos in here, but
Read
No.
now.
she had a phenomenal, I mean, she was a domestic, and she was a nanny to a little girl from a banking family in the city of Chicago. And as she wound up, her sisters wound up with jobs there, and they met there, plus when, and everybody is just for the Lynch family, their name was. But as Louise Charge grew, then she became her companion, and she was her traveling companion. So you find all these pictures of Aunt Louise. She never married, but she all over Europe and in Britain in these beautiful costumes, not costumes.
so this building on the left there is still there, that's, the corner of Main
That's
and
our building.
I was gonna say that's Nancy's
Corner.
church, what?
Dancing
Well,
Heart.
so we'll go.
the post office will be right where that tree is on the other
Yeah.
side.
Here's where the current post
I can
office.
just show.
And this is Emmy's? Okay.
Yeah, this is Emily was a piano teacher, and she gave piano
Send
out
it
the
to me.
front.
So all of these buildings, all of the buildings in this picture are still there.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, they really are.
This is kind of the core of the Monee Historic District. When they did the comprehensive plan and it was passed,
No.
we got them to designate a central core of Monee as the historic district. So far, that doesn't mean a lot, but as we grow, it will. We'll have some say-so in, what we'd like to do is get special
Lighting, I hope.
lighting, tax credits for people who fix up their property in there, a little bit of an oversight of what's done so that you can't just,
Wait for us.
you know, yeah, I know, right?
Maybe you get a rebate.
We buy it.
I tried, we tried.
So this one, this picture is looking north on Oak Street.
From where?
Kind of standing on Main Street looking.
So,
those buildings
so
there.
the store, Brock Miller's or Chester store would be right here, and then you're going down. When I was a kid, so that would be in the 60s, all of these buildings were still
We're
there.
still there.
Yeah. So
They-
Now,
they're-
the
they're-
one with the people in front of it, would that be,
Tom Pappas.
that's what I was thinking, is Tom Pappas store right there?
yeah.
Tell the Tom Pappas story. There was a
Yeah,
bank
because this
robbery
is
there.
Aunt Francilia, and this is Dan.
The little tiny one?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So
The crime spree of Monee.
this was a bank. You can see the edifice. I don't remember which of the banks it was. After that, when I was a kid, it was Perky's Tavern, but it was a bank, and the guys all like to meet in the back of the shop to play cards of an evening. And so Tom Pappas, who was a great uncle by marriage, was one of the guys back there, and they were all playing cards, and they heard shots out. This is in the 20s, 1926 or. So they heard shots. So they all, whip out their 6-shooter because naturally everybody's packing. And Tom went out there to stop the bank robbers, and Didn't work out so well, the bank robber shot him. So they never
For
caught
some
them,
reason,
they
I
never
seem to
recovered the
remember
money.
Daddy saying that he was hiding in the car out front or something.
Could be.
Yeah.
I don't
they
remember
were-
that.
They were there that night, for whatever reason.
So Main Street hasn't changed a lot. Still,
Rockefeller
we
store.
got the hitching posts are still out, and then the Model T Fords are there.
So you can see the carriage and the horse over here, but then there's the car, so
Mhm.
kind of boring with each other.
This is is that the Kettering Hotel?
Yeah.
One of the hotels, that one was, I think, on,
Is that Main and Locust? Right where the police station is.
Sure, I think that was on Chestnut, because I think that was the,
this was,
Legion Hall.
this was on Chestnut,
Yeah.
just north of Maine,
Where
Or south?
what's retired,
the Legion.
That's where the Legion
That metal
was,
building.
yeah.
Yeah.
Legion was
The
in New
Legion
Jersey.
Fire.
You
Yeah,
guys
that-
remember that building?
And
Yeah.
when we were kids, most of the large portion of the hotel had been dropped, and the back portion of the hotel was still standing there. That was the Legion Hall portion, and on Memorial Day, they would have parades and whatnot, and then there was a fish fry that they cooked all the fish in that portion of the building, if I remember.
Yeah, so it wasn't as big as it was,
No,
but
when
that
we were
building
little,
was
it was
still
not.
standing in the sixties.
And so this is Augustus Herbert's family name stone in the cemetery, the one that basically donated the land for the cemetery and the church.
So if you look now, his house was where the large brick, building is now, St. Paul's Church. And then this was, one part of it was his pigsty, but then when they moved the building, so the very northwest corner of the cemetery where this stone is, that was the first, because that was the Herbert family cemetery. And then he donated the land for the rest of the cemetery and for the church.
Actually, in this plot map, you can see down here,
It still shows the racetrack.
Wow, what is
and it
it?
shows the cemetery there, here's the racetrack. That, Monee Park Driving Association.
You can email me that picture.
So there, that previous picture where we got the bank and the hotel with, that's the same street area, but nice little Memorial Day parade there.
Go
And you
shoot
can see
it.
the street is still dirt.
mud.
And this one is on Oak Street looking north again, except it's focusing, this direction is focusing this, so there's the railroad before the cut was made, there's your depot, that's your depot right there. And the firehouse right there, would have been on the northwest corner of Main and Oak.
Yeah, just across Oak Street from now we're talking about the store, Chester's or Brockmiller's or Second Place, whatever you want to call it, but the one that's still there, that's sort of the focal point because that has been one of the few constants throughout, the boom and bust years of Monee. So it's still there, so that would be just to the west of it.
And of course, when the cut went in, that
station.
building would have to go.
Where the fire department.
That was, what now?
Fire
This
department.
is a mail truck here.
Well, the,
It was the fire department and it's still the fire department.
yeah, I mean, across the street though. Maybe just a shrink.
South of it, on the south side.
On the south side.
This was drawn in
South
one of
of
the
Main,
houses.
south side of Main.
Where our other building is, you mean? The Chestnut, you mean?
Yeah, that would be just on the south side of it.
Right.
Yeah.
That was what, a hotel with that?
We got an earlier picture, but it was a store, I'm not sure
Is
it was
that,
a
this
hotel.
must be, this is Chestnut again, this is looking south from Main Street, so right there on the right would be Kettering's Hotel, right?
That would be where the firehouse is right now.
Yeah. And then Radicky's beer there.
Well, no,
No.
Kettering would be,
That would be that would be where the firehouse is, that would be your building.
that would be your building.
Right, and
The
then
one
right
in
next to that is the Ford dealership.
Correct.
Yeah, right,
Oh, there we go.
right,
Yeah.
there's Willard Shop right next to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Village
this,
shop would be right
this
here.
building is still there on the corner.
Right, that's your building.
And then this is still here.
Oh, okay.
That's the Ford dealership that
And
they
I
now
think
repair
this
cars.
house here.
Oh, all right.
Right,
I think so.
Kettering Hotel, no, that would not, that's a little too far,
Kettering's one more out.
one more up.
Yeah, that's where the firehouse is.
This
Right.
way, I just wanna make a big map of Monee.
We'll get there.
That would
This
be
one's
cool.
Chestnut Street looking north. So that was just turn around from where we just were. So that's the big north.
Yep.
So where would Karen's hotel be then? Should be in here, right?
Yeah, it should be right about where your pointer
Or
is.
yours might not match up.
Right.
They're torn down by now. Looking north, or looking south on Oaks.
South.
So there's Rock Miller's there, and that little firehouse we saw there is the back of it.
Right,
And then here's that thing.
correct, and,
The ice cream, there's a little
ice cream shop and
there.
whatnot, yeah.
This was a hotel too. Oh, the names.
That was also, wasn't that Miller's Grocery? I think the building with the cupola on the top was Miller's Grocery, and then they let rooms upstairs, so there were two grocery stores.
That makes sense.
Okay, that all makes sense.
It's looking from the opposite direction of the other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be the
And
east side of the road.
The Millers, yeah, now you can easily see.
Yeah, Rock Miller's and the fire station, and then what we were just looking at.
But the large brick building on Main Street, it was a Rambo's funeral home, and it's right across. That was a private home, and it was built and owned by the Millers. And the Millers made their money, that was their grocery store, so that was where they lived.
And even up until the mid-70s and whatnot, all the carpeting in that building was still original to the home. They didn't really walk on it.
Wouldn't you love to know more? I'd like to know more state accounts.
Yes.
So the left is the fire department and the right is me.
Yeah, it's the tracks, you can just see the tracks there. Cut hasn't been put in yet.
Feel free if you've got questions on any of this.
And here's a version, after the cut has been made, so the
Right.
firehouse is gone. Rock Miller's is still there, everything's is still there. And that's today.
Pretty much modern, yeah.
Yeah, so not a whole lot different. Go back and forth.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
we're
we're
at the
too far.
farm again. Not really sure why I was about this. This might be the threshing gang. The only person I know who is in this picture is this guy up here. That is Heinrich Dietrich Holling. So George's. He's the only one I recognize. So
Even the
anybody
cats
else?
all piled up.
That's good.
Oh, yeah.
The cats all piled up.
They're all smoking their pipes.
Yep.
If they don't have them in their mouth, they have them in their hand. Taking a break.
So which pond was that?
This would have been Willard's grandfather.
This one, I have to find it, but on TikTok right now, there was some kind of world record they were trying to break with this big steam tractor, and they had 64 plows lined up, and it looked just like this. And it's all of these, so the guys would be standing on them as they're plowing, and the things go down. I never
Should
seen
try
it
to
before I
keep
saw
those
this
laid out
picture.
and people in the room.
Can you zoom in on that a little more, please?
Oh, that is cool.
Thank you, neat.
Yeah, and to see it in action, I wish I could find it on TikTok, but I
I've
saw
seen
it,
them.
I gotta find my picture so I can send it to them to show, but.
There is a video, something like that, you were talking about the steam tractor, on one of the railroad pages, and I can't think which one it is, because I've seen it over there a couple of times. I got 2 or 3 on my Facebook that I look at, and it's in there somewhere.
Yeah, this was, I've never seen that before, but look
Isn't
at
it
the
neat?
wheels on this thing.
People with the Thresherman's show might be able to, if not, show you one out there, they might have film
Steel.
of one.
One in action.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, this is again before the cut went in, you can see the depot, so Oak Street would be back here. And there's a train coming, we got the water.
On the left, would that be a grain elevator?
Yeah.
So we'll have another talk like this after everybody has read their copy of Our Roots Are Deep next month for the book club. Because there's a lot of information in that book. The reason that there's so much information out there, it was written, like Rachel said, in 1974 for the Monee Centennial. It was written by Muriel Milne, who grew up in town, and one of the people on that picture with the committee was Leona Erickson. Leona Erickson also grew up in town, and her grandfather was the editor of the newspaper. And there was a newspaper before the Monee Monitor, it was called the Monee Review, and they had access because Leona's grandfather had published the paper. They had, unbeknownst to any of us that I know of, there was an archive that she had of a lot of those newspapers. And so they got a lot of the information out of those papers that nobody else kept, nobody had a copy of it. So that information on that history is basically locked in those newspapers. So they pulled a lot of it out. You can see, if you read the paper, you can see the attributions, from the Monee Review of this date or of that date. Now, the wonderful thing about that is, and then Muriel wrote the book, and she passed away right away that same year, and Leona is now gone too, but her son Dennis was following us. He was always interested in history, just like his mother was, and he followed the Historical Society on Facebook from California. He lives in California now, and so he said he had given us, when he was selling his mother's house, he let us go in before the real estate people, and we took a lot of things out of there that were historical, and they're within our collections. We just need to get them archived and put together, because we have, just like in a lot of history, all the pieces are there, all the pieces of the puzzle are there in a jumble, and it's just pulling them all together from the different sources to make a picture. And that's what we're trying to do here, both with the history of Monee and the prehistory of Monee. We're working on projects for the Native American history that's here. Just the other night, Shuby, who's one of our members, brought in his arrowhead collection, and it's phenomenal. There were probably 100 arrowheads from the prehistory of here that his father and his grandfather had found on their farm. There are a lot of other farms and older farmers who have those kind of collections. We want to be able to document where they were found, and so we can put together a little, because people have lived in Monee for thousands of years, and I could never get my head around that until recently, but the evidence is here. But if you look for it in a book or online, you're going to find precious little information. So that is a place that the Heritage Society would love more volunteers to help us just research on Facebook, find the things that are online, and then also find the things that are out there and aren't online there. I think we went to a genealogical convention, and something one of the presenters said will always stick with me, and they said that currently people go online and they think they can find everything, but only 20% of the information is online. The other 80% is still in people's heads, in their attics, in boxes, in books that were published locally. You'll go into any library in any town and you'll find local history books that somebody wrote, and this is the only copy in the world, but there's a lot of information in those. So, and he said that ratio, that percentage will never change, because you can't, history keeps being made, and you can never get it all online. So it's always going to be 80% is out in the field, and 20% can you just let your fingers do the walking. So for Monee, it's a small enough pond. We don't have a large, vast geographical area to cover. We don't have a real deep history as far as, if you go to England and try to research your family, you're going back thousands and thousands of years. We've only been here, the newer settlers have only been here a couple hundred, but there is all that Native American to be discovered. The history of the railroad through here is a major part of our history. The history of, I hadn't realized what a connection. The Civil War, to me, was always a freestanding thing, and really it never happened here. But it did, in a way, because there was a cavalry unit mustered from Monee. There was an infantry mustered, and people, it was a big deal. If you read in Arbiter Deep, there's some things about, hundreds of people they had, how many Civil War veterans marching in the Memorial Day parade that still live here. Well, we want to find out some of the history of those things too. So, I'm rambling.
Christi, on the Civil War stuff, in the books and so on at the Monee Township that I think are now have been recorded or whatever and are at Governor's State. It gave a list of who was there from Monee for the Civil War, how much they were being paid. I mean, there was a whole lot of information on that. And it might be worthwhile when we have somebody who's has the time and so on to go through some of those records at Governor's State.
And a lot of the stuff that from Governor's State, it was digitized. We do
Yes.
have access to that. And so it's just a matter of pulling what's pertinent to this scope. We're hoping to start, this is Justin, he's a new member. And Justin is that's right. Did you learn anything new?
Always learn something from you. Thank you.
Almost got my book, that's what I
Nice.
Thank you, sorry we have to run, but we do.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We can stop.